2024 meeting of the Water Resource Advisory Board. And I'll turn it over to Joanna to go over the rules.
Great. Thank you. Hi, my name is Joanna Bloom, and I'm serving as the technical host for this meeting. We'll start with sharing a few slides of the virtual meeting rules that we follow. These rules are in place to find a balance between transparency with community members and security that minimizes disruptions. We do need a full name associated with each person's participation in open or public comment. If your full name is not currently displayed, please change it, or you can send me a text and I'm happy to change it for you. There is no chat feature for this meeting. The Q&A function is enabled and can be used to address Zoom connectivity questions only. But again, you can text me if you need technical support. I am at 303-817-1742. Members of the public may be unable to control the audio or video features. Video is limited to city officials, employees, and invited speakers only. I will unmute you when you're recognized to speak. I will call your name when it's your turn to speak and announce the name of the next speaker on deck. And after I've unmuted you, please say your first and last name, and then a 3-minute timer will be displayed and you may start with your comments there. And let me just see if there's anybody joining by phone. There's not. So I believe that's it, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Joanna. We can move to approving of the June meeting minutes. I read through them and didn't have any edits or questions. Anyone else have any suggestions or edits? No. Just note, Steve is curious. We're having technical difficulties. Yeah. Is there a motion to approve the June meeting minutes?
I motion to approve the June meeting minutes.
Yeah. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous vote to approve the meeting minutes, and we can move to virtual public comment. Do we have anyone queued up?
Great. Let me just give folks a moment to virtually raise your hand if you'd like to speak. You can generally find the controls at the bottom of your screen. And I do see one attendee, Lynn Siegel, who would like to speak. Lynn, give me just 1 second and you should be able to unmute now.
Yeah, on the last meeting, I was jumping back and forth between the Colorado River project at the JCC and the EV demonstration project, and trying to come at the time that I could speak multiple times, and I still didn't get to speak. So I'm very resentful that you cannot somehow accommodate to people who also have very busy lives. And I mean, it's so ironic. I was trying to follow the Colorado River project, and I'm distracted with the RAB meeting, and then I don't even get to speak. There's something really wrong with that, and there's something really wrong with the fact that this time I can't have my 3 minutes back. That's not okay. Just saying. Now, John Berggren works at WRA, which is the site of a water demonstration project for non-point source pollution. It was built in the 90s. It's going to be demolished. It's horrific that RAB didn't have something to do with the preservation of this project, with the Basin Project, if you've heard of that acronym. There were 4 demonstration projects in the state of Colorado. The site at Baseline and Broadway on the southwest corner was designed as a demonstration project for runoff, stormwater runoff, such that it could be absorbed and filtered on site with 3 ponds and the various landscaping accoutrements that were done to it. And because the planning board offered the developer 16,000 extra square feet, since we're going from commercial to housing in this community, the developer argued that he couldn't fit the parking for all of that residential conversion, the conversion from commercial to residential. Where WRA is, I don't think they're there now. Maybe they are, John, I don't know, but they were. And so that space is, their argument for demolition was that they couldn't fit the parking for all of that residential on it. Then why did this ever happen? The boards need to work integratively between the planning board, and you and others, because, and the landmarks board, because this place should never have been demolished. It isn't yet, but it will be. And that's just not okay either. And all this development with the crisis of water that we have, water is life, CU South, the East Campus, the airport, and the planning reserve all should not happen. And you need to do something about this because it affects your position. Done.
Okay.
That's just my 3 minutes.
That is your 3 minutes, and there'll be another chance to comment under the public hearing later. I don't see any other
I
members.
know that, and I'm
of-
going to miss the Rocky Flats thing as a result of this.
Thanks,
So,
Lynn.
everyone has busy lives. So does the public. My mom died as a result of Rocky Flats. It's a big deal. But now I'm stuck here.
Thanks, Lynn. I don't see anybody else that is signed up for public comment or open comment this evening.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Joe, if you want to respond at all to why or why not utilities and RAB would get involved in a development review like the one that that Lynn was talking about?
Yeah, sure. And good evening, board and members of the public. I'm Joe Tadiucci. I'm the director of the utilities department for the city. And in the city charter, each of the boards purview is spelled out. And there are a few boards, and RAB is one of them, that it's specifically stated that the board shall not involve itself in land use types of matters. And so there's kind of certain separations that have been established over the years, and it can be tricky to navigate at times for the public, for sure, and even us as staff and board members, but we try to channel things into the right lanes where specific boards and city bodies act on certain types of things. So that's why. And since I've got the mic, if I can just speak to the comment about extra time for this meeting, and for those who may not be aware, we had a glitch on the agenda last time, and the public comment time was posted for later than we intended. And so we still gave an opportunity for public comment at the time we normally do at the beginning of the meeting, and then we gave an additional opportunity later. And just in the course of doing board business, the speaking time, if you can imagine trying to manage, it does not carry over from meeting to meeting. Fortunately, the board didn't take any action on anything last month. It was just information items. So if there are members of the public who felt like they didn't get to say what they wanted to say, you can always email the board and staff and provide information that way. And we've got 2 opportunities tonight with the open comment at the beginning of the meeting, and then we have a public hearing on the capital improvement program. So.
Great, thanks, Joe. Yeah, I'll just reiterate apologies for the screw up on the agenda last month. Yeah, that was our bad. So with that, we can move to the public hearing.
Sounds good. So the first item we have tonight, as I just mentioned, is the public hearing on the capital improvement program, and we are seeking a board recommendation. As we've discussed previously, we normally do the CIP, as we call it, in 3 meetings, where May is a refresher on where we left off last year, and an opportunity for our newest board member to quickly get up to speed. And then in June, we try to really clear the agenda and do a deep dive into the capital improvement program and the proposed rates, get any board feedback, And then we come back in July and follow up on any loose ends that were there and look for a board recommendation, and it's a chance for the public to weigh in on the program and rate. So that's where we are tonight. And we have a really brief presentation. There are a few minor updates that we want to provide since June and some things that we wanted to follow up on from discussion from the June meeting. And the flow of the meeting will start with a staff presentation that'll be followed by clarifying questions that the board might have of staff. Then we go to the public hearing, and then after that, there's the time for the board to deliberate and make a formal recommendation. And we've got a couple of motions prepared in the packet. Steph Klingeman is our principal budget analyst, and she's not in Boulder tonight, so she'll be presenting virtually on Zoom. And so she will take it from there. So I think I'm ready for you, Steph. You take it
Thanks.
from there.
Thanks, Joe. Again, Steph Klingeman, the Principal Budget Analyst for Utilities. And we've got an agenda here. That next slide, Chris, if you don't mind moving forward, thanks. So as Joe mentioned, the goal tonight is to provide any additional clarity on our priorities, projects, rates, and associated impacts that will enable a final recommendation. Joe did touch on the agenda for this evening. So following the information that I share, we'll pause for any clarifying questions. Then we'll move into the public hearing portion of the meeting and finally end with RAB deliberation on the motion and the recommendation. Next slide. So just to briefly recap the June RAB meeting, we discussed the following items here. So we initially discussed the need to occasionally shift the timing of capital projects to optimize financial planning, accommodate operational needs, or to address community impact concerns. We also discussed our financial strategies with regards to reserves, fund management, and financing options. Our reserves play a crucial role in ensuring resilience and sustainability for the utility and can be leveraged to buffer against any unexpected expenses, to mitigate large capital costs, or to smooth out cash flows. Regarding other aspects of fund management, we track certain financial metrics like days cash on hand and our debt service coverage ratio to ensure that our funds are healthy. Ensuring that these metrics are kept in line with best practices also strengthens our financial position during the bonding process. Our financing strategies around capital projects will depend on the availability of cash, market conditions, and our financial position. We do plan to bond in Q1 of 2025 for our South Boulder Creek Storm and Flood project. As we discussed last time, we talked about potentially bonding in 2028 or 2029 for projects within our water and wastewater funds. And we may also consider another stormwater bond in 2028, although I'll mention that that's not currently modeled in our fund financial. We are still several years out, so we have not finalized those outer year bonding decisions just yet. Regarding the Gregory Creek Canyon project, Chris Douglas mentioned in our last meeting that staff is currently working with impacted property owners and City Council on the easement acquisition process. This project is currently forecasted to begin construction in 2026 and will include channel improvement and culvert widening at road crossings. Are there any questions with regards to that slide? Okay, next slide, please. So these are the proposed recommended rates from our June meeting. You can see for 2025, it is an 8% rate increase in our water rates, a 6% rate increase for our wastewater rates, and a 5% increase for our stormwater and flood rates. We've also included 2026 and 2027 projected. Next slide, thanks. So this slide shows the rate impacts for residential single-family homes based on varying levels of water usage. A typical home consuming 3,000 gallons per month is projected to see an increase of about $6.31 in their monthly rate. A single-family home consuming about 6,200 gallons is projected to see an increase of around $7.67 in their monthly rate. and a single family home consuming about 7,500 gallons per month is projected to see on average an increase in their monthly rate of about $8.61. So that's an average change of between 6.4 and 6.7%. In the bar graph below, I've broken down the projected monthly bills by utility. So wanted to see if there are any questions here. I know we briefly touched on this in the last meeting and presented on the 7,500 gallon scenario, but wanted to provide a couple of extra examples here. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide shows some example bill impacts for the multifamily and commercial and industrial customers. I'll just mention that specific customer impacts do vary slightly based on details such as water meter size, water budgets, and usage, which may or may not include irrigation. So within the commercial and industrial class, there is significant variability in usage patterns and the types of the structure. So I did illustrate these impacts in terms of percent changes rather than dollar values. But yeah, in general, just to kind of give a broad average, we're looking at rate increases for the multifamily and commercial and industrial customers of between 6 and 7%. Okay, next slide, please. Finally, I just wanted to mention a couple of minor revisions to the CIP schedules. The treated water transmission and secondary clarifier projects will be ready to advance in 2025. They were originally slated for 2026, and I did highlight those changes in the attachments of the memo that was provided. It does not have a significant impact on the 5-year fund balance projection that we presented in the last meeting, but we did want to mention these slight changes in project timing.
Question, just, was there any particular reason why they were accelerated or?
I can go ahead and answer that, but Chris, you probably have a better answer than I do.
I'm trying to multitask and turn my screen on at the same time, so give me just a moment.
I think a lot of the time, more often than not, projects go the other way, and I think the staff team just really feel like they're ready and those projects are ready to go.
And that is the case, and good evening, board. I'm Chris Douglas, the utilities engineering manager, and really, it was this, as we were talking to staff, these were projects that were in the design process. And as we looked at it, we did have the realization that we can advance quicker, where it was something along the lines that we were thinking in early 2026 for these projects, but now it's looking like earlier in the 2025 timeframe, and it frankly, it's the timing just really worked out.
Were there any other questions?
I think we need to get back to the presenter mode.
Yes, thank you.
It's like flying a 747. All kinds of controls.
So that really wraps up my brief financial summary. We did want to open it back up to the board for any other questions about the proposed capital improvement program or the rates. So is there anything else that we can help address?
Can we go back to that slide for a minute that showed the increase by level of use?
This one here.
For the single family or the?
Yeah, I guess that one. It's interesting that our water bills are comprised in a percentage way so much of fixed charges that the impact of considerably different amounts of usage doesn't really affect the bill much, which it really kind of shows there that, a family using twice as much water is only going to pay like, whatever, a third of a percentage more than the lower end user. So I guess it's interesting to me that our water rates are so kind of not dependent upon volume, if you will.
They are, and I might invite Joanna Bloom, who oversees our billing team, to weigh in here, but I will say one of the things that we have on the work plan in the coming years is to update a new rate study. We implemented the tiered water budget rate structure, I think around 2008. We updated things in 2018. And the fixed charges need to be there because we have to run the water treatment plant regardless. So we don't send like I said last month, we don't send an operator home if it's a lower production day. It's not that kind of a business model, but we've learned a lot since implementing this rate structure, and the way we've done it is actually really complicated as well for our billing team to try and implement. So we want to take those lessons and update some things here in the next few years, and with the hope of it also being more effective.
And I noticed that just looking at my own water bill, every month it, my usage goes up and down a fair bit, but the bill doesn't.
Pretty similar.
Really, and I guess it's just an interesting point that it's not more volume dependent. Is that pretty typical for other utilities, or in terms of sort of that percentage of the total monthly charge that's sort of fixed versus variable?
It's a fair point, and I think every utility struggles with how to strike that balance and needs to account for the fixed costs. So I think it is fairly common for utilities to experience that. And Joanna, you're closer to the billing world. I don't know if you have anything that you would add to that, and it's okay if not.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna Bloom, Deputy Director of Policy and Planning for Utilities. The only thing that I would add is that I think you're right, Steve. Probably what you're observing is that my guess, I haven't looked at your bill, but my guess is you primarily use water in those first two blocks, which does maintain pretty consistent bill charges. As soon as you kick into those 3, 4, and 5 blocks, and some customers really do, it is significantly different in terms of the consumption charges. I do think the water budget evaluation that Joe alluded to, that it'll be a several-year process. We'll look at right sizing potentially those water budgets so that it might be more sensitive, but I just don't, there's so much to look at there. But I will say if you stay in those 1 and 2 blocks, it is pretty manageable for right now.
Thank you.
Any consideration of having like a hardship rate, or some communities have elderly bill rates and sort of they account for people who are using less water and may have more difficulty paying their bills?
We haven't looked at that concept specifically, but I think we're open to any and all of that. And I feel like one of the pillars of our operation in utilities is having a safety net and bill assistance, as we've discussed for people. The last several years, we've had the benefit of the ARPA funding, which is the need for it kind of went away. And so we reallocated that to other things in the city. But I was just talking to Joanna about this today, and it's something that is top of mind for us.
Has the proposed rate increase historically been applied evenly across all of the blocks? Or has there ever been a time where we say the 3rd block it's a higher increase than the 1st block?
That's an interesting question. I think I know. I think it's been applied the same, but
Yeah, that's the history that I understand as well. We have talked about looking at other strategies potentially in future years, Katie, maybe not increasing the fixed charge as high as the volumetric rate. But I think once we start looking at the tiered structure and kind of getting more into the meat and potatoes of like a real rate study and looking at that, that'll kind of fall out of that study.
Any more detail on the timing of the rate study other than just a couple years?
I think that's where it stands right now. Our focus in that world is, it's been a while since we've done software upgrades. We're doing a comprehensive overall of our billing system that is taking most of that team's attention this year. So I think, and Joanna, weigh in if you have more to add, but I think some of that will be starting in 2025.
From the board. Yeah, should let's move to the public hearing and interested members of the public are welcome to speak on the public hearing topic, which is the approval and recommendation of the CIP. Joanna, do we have anyone who's raised their hand or signed up?
Let me take a look real quickly, and just before that, I was getting some comment that my audio was a little crackly. Is it okay now? Better?
It's totally fine, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So just looking to see if any members of the public do want to speak. I'll give it just a second so you can virtually raise your hand. Okay. We have one, Lynn Siegel is here to comment, and Lynn, go ahead and try to unmute.
Yeah, so to make things fair in this community, you know, there's a lot of wealthy people in this community that are pushing all these major development projects, like the Planning Area Reserve, Area 3, like CU South, like the airport, like the East Campus, like the quantum business, the quantum physics huge thing at CU. These things grow our community massively. And for one, you're going to have more and more higher and higher stormwater and flooding and major infrastructure jobs to do over time without it being accounted for by the ability of the folks to pay for it. And I mean, even the rich folks aren't going to be able to pay for it at this rate. This is just unacceptable. And if you want to develop all these extra projects, you need to be the ones on the front line, and the planning board, and the landmarks board, and the HAB, and the TAB, that were defunded in so many areas of this city government. And we can't be buying up things that we don't have the money to pay for. And the people in this community get it dumped on them. Like I always say, let the developer pay. CU is floating in the bucks. The developers in this town, the Moxie on the hill, the conference center, like there are so many big profit issues coming to this community, and water is life. And this is your responsibility. And you know this. I'm not telling you anything new. I don't care to be here to speak down to you, to speak to you what is obvious. This is all obvious. You all know this. But you really need to stand up and speak to the origin of the issues. Not just tweaking around the water bill a little bit, but looking at the 30,000-foot perspective of what we are getting ourselves into with a greater population and the limited water opportunities in this semi-arid state. It's just not okay to use. And then, and not anticipate. I mean, Joanna was telling me, yeah, we have all this infrastructure. Yes, well, that infrastructure needs to be added into each house that's built here, each project that goes in, each big project that goes in all over town, each infill thing, all the things that build population and water demand.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. I do not see any other members of the public here this evening.
I don't know. Joe or anyone else want to just kind of respond about what growth means for water and the utilities department, in kind of the big picture?
Yeah, for sure. It's something that our water resources team members and Chris and his team, we perform modeling and consider different scenarios for growth. And there's multiple aspects to that, because I think a lot of our council members and some of the priorities they set in their retreat are aimed at improving housing opportunities for people, so that home is a more affordable place to live. So certainly appreciate the feedback tonight and just the balancing act to try and manage all of that. I would say Boulder and just built into our charter and our city policies that compared to other municipalities, the growth potential just is not, it's not unlimited, it's not that big.
Thank you, Joe. That concludes the public comments. Now we're moving to our proposed motions.
Yeah, proposed motions
Or
and
deliberations.
we can show you the motions first, so you
Let's leave the
know.
motions, and then if you have any comments, we can talk about it.
We'll put Chris back on the spot to work the controls again with the PowerPoint. And we've set it up just like we did last year with two separate motions, recognizing that board member Broughton works for a consulting firm that supports some of the projects, so giving her the opportunity to recuse herself when it comes to a vote on those specific projects. And then the second motion is the balance of everything else.
So this is the first motion. Let folks read it.
That was gonna be my question. Why are you broken into when you were?
Yep, that's why.
Troublemaker.
Well, and it happened, I mean, the board members volunteer their time and have interest in the water area, and it's not that uncommon to have a board member who also works with us in some capacity, or the firm does.
I don't have any,
The second one, just
Yeah. then it's the
take a
second
look.
like Joe said, this is the remainder of the CIP
Yes.
with the proposed increase in rates. Any comments or questions on either? Go back to the first one. Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second,
I will second.
all in favor?
And
Choosing yourself, so.
Accusing myself.
That's three affirmative votes, and then board member Broughton recuse yourself. We can move to the second motion. Is there a motion?
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Cool, that was easy.
Well, thank you to the board for working with us these past few months, and to all the staff members who have been working hard on the budget and the capital improvement program. Really going back to January, with lots of internal staff meetings and pencil sharpening. And I'm really pleased that we've brought forward the program that we have and actually managed to have a little bit lower rates than what we were proposing last year. So thanks to all involved and to the board.
Yeah, and thanks, especially then, thanks for the staff and Stephanie. I know it seems a lot to have 3 consecutive meetings on the CIP, but I do think it's helpful. In my 5th year, I'm still learning a ton, so I appreciate it. Thanks to everyone for the presentations and all the effort, and ditto what Joe said.
Yeah, and ditto what John just said. Thank you so much to the staff for making it so comprehensive and easy to understand.
Okay, I guess with that, we can move to the next agenda item, which is an information item on water quality updates.
Yep, and I'll be really brief here. There's three key updates and we sometimes bring things to the board that we think are of public interest and anticipate that the board members themselves may be interested in or receive questions from the public. So that's what we have tonight. And I am going to turn it over to Megan Wilson Outcall, who is our Senior Water Quality Manager, and she will introduce her team members and tee us up for this one.
Sounds good. Good evening, board members. Megan Wilson Outcall, Senior Water Quality Manager for Utilities. Just super brief background on the water quality team. I know I've had an opportunity to speak with many of you. Where we support water quality compliance across drinking water, stormwater, and wastewater. So we cover a lot of areas. Tonight we have 3 areas that are a little bit more timely. And you're going to hear from Megan Chantler on the water service line inventory project. And then Michael Lawler, Megan is our drinking water compliance program manager. And then you'll hear from Michael Lawler with an update on the Eurasian water milfoil in Boulder Reservoir, and then water quality update on Boulder Creek focused on E. coli. And I also just wanted to recognize we have sorry, did you say something? Oh, I'm hearing things. Just wanted to recognize there are a couple of staff from the Parks and Recreation Department who are online. So just in case any questions come up around Boulder Reservoir, more from the recreation standpoint, they're here too. So these are 3 disparate topics. You're welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation. We'll also have time at the end for questions. So turn it over to you, Megan.
Thank you. My name is Megan Chantler. I'm Water Quality Compliance Program Manager in the Drinking Water team. And we wanted to just provide a bit of an update and status and next steps on our water service and inventory project. So we are following these new federal and state requirements, and staff are conducting an inventory of the material type of all water service lines that fall within the city's service area. And each water service line does have a city-owned portion and a customer-owned portion. You also can see in this diagram here the distinction between city-owned portion and customer-owned portion. And then the main purpose of conducting this inventory is really to ensure that there are no lead lines in the city's service area. So ultimately, we will replace any discovered lead lines and some galvanized lines. So staff are seeking approval from the state at varying intervals throughout this inventory process, just to make sure we are following guidelines appropriately from the state. This project team has used several different methods to investigate the service line materials, starting with the 1955 ordinance requiring the use of copper water service lines, which means that all properties that are built after 1956 are automatically classified as copper. Staff have also reviewed over 5,000 historical permit records in Laserfiche, and about half these records documented the water service line material type. The example that we can kind of see here specifies copper main to house. So looking at both sides of that water service line, customer owned and city owned. Staff have also received over 1,000 visual inspections of water service lines. And this is completed through both the customer and city inspections to document the material of the customer owned portion of the service lines. And these are viewed from within properties. So in the basement or crawl space, the picture we have here is actually from a customer's crawl space. So not super easy to access. We also have potholes that are being conducted in the city street to inventory the material type of the city side of the service line. So we still have a couple thousand unknowns in our inventory. And rather than investigate or visually inspect every single one of those unknowns, we're following the state's guidance to visually inspect a statistically valid number of those unknowns. And this comes to about 340 visual inspections of both the city side and the customer side. So of Boulder's approximately 28,000 service lines, staff have successfully classified about 25,000 as copper or assumed copper. We've discovered no lead lines at this point, and less than 0.1% of service lines are galvanized. So this leaves us with about 10%, so about 2,700 with still unknown material type.
And as we just mentioned in the previous slide, staff are required to visually inspect a statistically significant number of those unknowns. And this does include inspections on the city-owned portion and the customer-owned portion. And then so based on the results of those unknown, that random sample and further guidance from the state, we might be able to assume that all those unknown service lines are just non-lead. Or we might need to go back to the state and continue with targeted investigations of more of our unknowns. Any questions?
Are the 10% of the unknowns, can you speak a little bit to their geography? Like, are they all in similar neighborhoods or?
Yeah, that's a really great question. They're the unknowns that we do have, they're all built before 1956. It was the older part of town, the city of Boulder. I'm not super great at geography, but they are.
I mean,
It's in the
so that was the question, if you do the statistically significant, like the 300 whatever,
Yeah,
you're pretty confident of the remaining ones, it sounds like.
yes,
Because they're both from a statistic standpoint and because they're all kind of in the same area.
exactly. They're kind of clumped together in a similar area of Boulder. Yeah.
When did copper lines first come into widespread usage? Roughly, I mean,
Yeah, we do see copper lines initially being installed. We just don't have a lot of records for, I would say, probably before the 1940s or so. We don't have a ton of records before the
so for a lot of the houses in the older part of town that were built originally, let's say in the early 1900s or that time frame, would they have all been refitted sometime between, you know, the original construction and when this 1955 they came in?
Sometimes there were galvanized lines potentially that were installed first and then replaced with copper lines, but not necessarily copper line would have been replaced.
What would have driven that replacement process back then? I mean, there were no regulations or anything. Why would people have been like in, I don't know, say the 60s or 70s or something? What would be an incentive for somebody to tear out an old line and put in a copper line other than just maybe health concerns or whatever?
That's a great question. Galvanized lines typically don't last super long. So the replacement of galvanized line would just be because of the deterioration of that line typically. But just wants to jump in on that.
I wish we knew the answer to that question. We've researched a lot of historical records, not just the permit records, but also old construction records and other documents. And if we knew that answer, we might be even more certain about what we'd find. But we did find that some of the tap cards that we looked at, the permit records, said replacement. And so those started in the 1930s. I don't know why they were replaced. Probably deterioration. The city also had a lot of problems with frozen pipes back in the day.
So in the 1900s or early 1900s, most of the lines that would have been originally put in the houses would have been lead?
We don't
Or
know.
were there some other materials that were in use at that time? Or
I think galvanized was used quite early on.
Yeah, and we're talking about the service lines that would be buried in the ground and depending on where you are in Boulder, we have some pretty aggressive soils. And so I imagine those galvanized lines would have deteriorated. And there's a decent chance, that'd be my theory, that was a factor.
We also have evidence going back, I think, to the 1970s, and we just assumed that where water mains were replaced, we would have replaced the city-owned portion with copper if it was anything but copper. That's been a pretty long-standing practice, but they wouldn't have replaced the customer side likely.
And I think I would just add to the presentation, which I really appreciate that. Super newsworthy stuff in Flint, Michigan around lead and drinking water and just we try to reiterate it every time. That's not what we have here in Boulder.
We don't have any of the wood surface lines, do we? I know Denver has some. There you go.
And does the lab offer the option for Boulder residents to provide water quality samples to be tested for lead?
So we're not certified for lead and copper sampling in our lab, but the state does have a laboratory that we send samples to be analyzed for lead and copper.
So if interested Boulder homeowners wanted to know, I have a really old house, I could have lead pipes, they could use that service through the state.
Yeah, they definitely could. And they also, because the service line does enter properties in the adjacent of crawl space, if you have access to that, you can also check out your line. Like kind of face to face with the line.
And how would I know it was lead?
We have a great website actually about that we can direct you to if you like. Yeah.
And we also have staff who will go, we've done, I don't know how many inspections with our staff who will actually go out to the home if you can't access it or don't know what it is, even after doing the scratch and magnet tests.
We can maybe just jump through our last slide here too. As far as next steps go, if we do find any lead service lines or galvanized lines that were ever downstream of lead, they'll need to be on a replacement plan. And galvanized lines that could be on a replacement plan would only be on a replacement plan if we could not prove they were never downstream of lead. So essentially, if we don't have records for those galvanized lines, they could be replaced. And just to give a bit of a touch point of what this might look like is we have about 50 galvanized records of water service lines in our system, but maybe only about 5 to 10 could even qualify as needed to be replaced. And then in October of this year, staff will be publishing our inventory on our city's website, and it'll look similar to this Denver water map example here, where customers can go and look up their address and find their water service line material type. And we'll also be submitting this initial inventory to the state's website. And then this is an ongoing project. The EPA does expect to finalize lead and copper removal improvements by the end of this year. And so those improvements document might introduce some revised requirements for the inventory and for the replacement plan. A little bit more to come on that.
If you did find somebody with lead pipes, what would the procedure be? You would tell them they need to replace it, and it's at their own cost? And do you have any enforcement capability of that, or what sort of happens when you do find?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're still trying to figure out what lines even need to be replaced in our system. But if a lead line was discovered, we would provide the customer actually a water filter in the meantime, and then it would go on to a replacement plan. And still kind of deciding who might pay for that. It's not decided quite yet. Move on to our next topic.
Great. Again, my name is Michael Lawler. I'm the Urban Water Quality Program Coordinator. I'll be presenting on the remaining 2 water quality topics this evening. First of which is the management of Eurasian water milfoil, an invasive aquatic plant in Boulder Reservoir. So since identified in 2022, Eurasian water milfoil has continued to rapidly spread throughout Boulder Reservoir, with extensive growth being concentrated in the western coves. The figure on the left here shows that the extent of the Eurasian water milfoil from a recent vegetation survey, and the red areas represent just about 100% coverage. Current populations have decreased boating access in those western coves and have created safety concerns for swimmers. If left untreated, Eurasian water milfoil could also adversely impact water quality and ecosystem health and threaten the regional water supply. So management of Boulder Reservoir is a joint effort between the city and Northern Water. City activities are coordinated internally between the utilities and parks and recreation departments. And the city, in partnership with Northern Water, has hired a consultant to develop an adaptive management plan for Eurasian water milfoil in Boulder Reservoir. This slide here shows the primary recommendations from that adaptive management plan. I'd like to highlight that none of these recommendations will eradicate Eurasian water milfoil. It's more of this combination of management strategies is what was suggested to best reduce our current populations. Current management activities include conducting routine vegetation surveys to track Eurasian water milfoil populations over time, inform management strategies, and evaluate treatment outcomes. Parks and Recreation staff are also manually removing Eurasian water milfoil at priority locations to reduce swimmer safety concerns and limit fragmentation in high traffic areas. The other primary recommendation from this report was the strategic use of selective herbicide applications, which can be applied with minimal risk to water quality, recreation, and irrigation. We recognize that herbicide applications are a sensitive topic, and we want to notify RAB early in the interest of transparency. And after evaluating herbicide options, the consultant team recommended triclopyr because it's a selective herbicide that's already being used upstream of Boulder Reservoir. We are currently targeting a spring application in 2025, and any applications will comply with the city's integrated pest management policy with the long-term goal of controlling Eurasian water milfoil with minimal herbicide use. Our consultant team also recommended further exploring water level management and permanent bottom barriers as additional strategies to complement the manual removal and herbicide application efforts. These options were excluded from the list of primary recommendations at this time because they require further evaluation of their feasibility. They involve long-term planning and came with pretty costly price tags. So the next steps for managing Eurasian water milfoil are focused on refining and implementing the recommended management strategies and community outreach. Northern Water is currently working through their RFP process in collaboration with city staff to hire an herbicide applicator. This applicator will be able to provide expert knowledge about the timing, extent, and frequency of any potential herbicide applications to meet our management goals. Both the city and Northern Water have been collaborating on a communication strategy to engage with the public and downstream users well in advance of any potential herbicide treatments due to the sensitive nature of that issue. Finally, city staff will continue to provide updates to their respective boards and the community while finalizing the management details for addressing Eurasian water milfoil in Boulder Reservoir. That concludes. Can pause here. Yeah, happy to pause here because I'm sure there may be a few questions.
Just curious if there's any, I know you said none of the strategies would completely eradicate the Eurasian water milfoil, but like the herbicide, what's your goal? 90% reduction, 50% reduction, or do you have any sense of how much that will actually help?
Yeah, that will in part be able to be answered more thoroughly when we do get an applicator on board. Basically, we're hoping to reduce the overall populations right now to a much more manageable level. So at percentages is tough, especially never know the response of plants and biology, given the conditions in a reservoir. That being said, yes, we're hoping to achieve large scale control with herbicide applications in the hopes that then we can start to layer in some of these alternative treatment strategies or management strategies to help reduce the amount of herbicides in the long run. So trying to not to be a long-term strategy of relying on herbicides and being able to transition away.
Okay, so yeah, that was my second question. It's not the long-term plan to have to spray every spring. It's
Correct.
Get it under control and then use some of the other methods to keep it in control.
Correct. Yeah, that's the long-term goal of this management plan. And the proof will be in the pudding to see what those large-scale treatments can achieve, and that will kind of dictate the timing for herbicide reliance.
The water level management, does that involve lowering levels so that you can easily manually remove, or what, how does that work?
Yeah, great question. Happy to speak to that. So water level management is exactly that. So reducing the level of the reservoir can can help us achieve management outcomes for in a number of different ways in the winter. By exposing that sediment, you can actually freeze the plant, and that helps to provide some control. We have seen, we're just out at the reservoir today with our consultant team, and we did observe exactly that. So there was a ring around the perimeter of the reservoir where the sediment was exposed, and there we did see limited aeration water milfoil in that area. It also helps with treatment costs for the herbicide applications. So you have to treat a certain volume, so the less water in the reservoir there, it could help us reduce treatment costs. And then also help reduce installation costs if we ever decide to go towards the bottom barrier route. By having more of the reservoir exposed, it's much easier to install those.
You mentioned that risks to recreation would be pretty minimal. Is the spring just hoping to get ahead of that before like the res opens up, or could you speak a little bit more to the specifics of back to recreation?
Yeah, so the specific herbicide that was recommended in this plan was triclopyr. It does not have any recreational restrictions to it. So I think that we're still trying to identify exactly what that will mean for our recreation season. But exactly to your point, I think we are trying to time that in during a time where the plant is growing, and B, we don't see quite as heavy recreational use, so that it's not as much of an impact to our public users.
You say you're manual removing, a bunch of people will just stand out there pulling weeds like I'm pulling dandelions in the yard.
Exactly. So we have that. I'm not sure how they also use rakes, that sort of thing underwater. So, but it's still very similar to removing plants. But
So how feasible an option is that? I mean, can you get 10 people out there and they can try out the beach area, or what's the sort of scope?
Certainly it is not a long-term control strategy, and this is kind of what the Parks and Recreation staff are currently doing to keep our swim beach open. I think in May, staff spent at least 80 hours removing weeds. In June, as the plant continues to grow, they spent a lot more. And so that's kind of what is needed at this time to kind of reduce that risk to swimmer safety. We want to make sure
Just in that small beach area.
that exactly.
Do you know how this was introduced?
That is hard to say. We don't know exactly. It first showed up in 2022 during a Colorado Parks and Wildlife routine vegetation survey. And then it quickly grown and spread to the graphic I showed earlier. And that's kind of what prompted us to take an aggressive action to put together this management plan, but it's not known.
But we knew other reservoirs in the area had also had this issue.
Yes, and so suspected it could be from recreators, it could be from pets, could be from a whole number of different vectors that could have brought it from one reservoir to another. Fortunately, that's the nature of these invasive species.
What's the sort of worst case scenario here? I mean, that slide you showed with the red was pretty dramatic. I mean, what's the?
Yeah, so worst case, you're not gonna see it's highly unlikely you'd ever see that whole reservoir go red. I mean, it at some depth, ultimately these plants get limited by light availability. So we'll likely stick to the perimeter. And then it's just kind of how habitable the different substrates are.
And what is this pesticide? I hadn't heard that name before, but is it some
It's
kind of pyrethrum derivative or?
I'm not sure if pyrethrum I don't believe it is a pyrethrum derivative, but the name is triclopyr. It's yeah, it was selected because it's a selective herbicide and will target Eurasian water milfoil, and that it's also widely known to be effective in its
And
control.
you could be spraying it around the beaches without worrying about any human impact. Or at
So-
least to some extent, you try not to do that, obviously, but.
So there are certain restrictions that, yeah, that the applicator who selected will certainly adhere to.
The concentrations and things like that, and Northern Water manages the whole system, and they already use it in the canal, and we know other municipalities who have let us know that they use this chemical in their some of their water sources. And I'll just add before Michael changes topics here. I really appreciate the work that the staff teams have done on this, and our Parks and Recreation Department staff who manage the reservoir, and our utilities water quality staff really working closely in partnership and all kinds of different considerations. And Valley Roads, our park director, and I have been briefed a number of times, and one of the takeaways that I've had is that this, I mean, you just heard it started in 2022. It is moving quickly, and so I think we're here and we're recommending this management plan because we have to act, or it'll get away from us even more.
Question really quick, in the memo that was sent to you, it talked about growing near the 63rd water treatment plant intake and the Boulder Creek Supply Canal. Is the manual removal something that could keep those clear as well?
I think if necessary, manual removal is a lot more challenging at greater depths. So I think we're still waiting to figure out how much it is spread in those locations and continue to wait on some of these more recent vegetation surveys. But I think its presence has been known. It is not proliferated in those areas at this moment, but I think we certainly should continue to be evaluating those options. I'm happy to move on to topic number 2 or 3 here. Yeah, so our final water quality topic here is to provide an update on the city's efforts to monitor and address E. coli in Boulder Creek. So, background, E. coli is a bacteria that inhabits the intestinal tract of warm-blooded animals that is commonly used as an indicator of pathogens, which may potentially make recreators sick. Many urban streams across Colorado are impaired for E. coli, including Boulder Creek, due to their proximity to stormwater and wastewater infrastructure, urban wildlife, domestic pets, and human recreational activity. It is challenging to delist streams impaired for E. coli because there are typically multiple dispersed sources that are challenging to control. This update will focus on current Boulder Creek E. coli trends, findings from the city's recent E. coli source investigations, and current E. coli reduction efforts. City staff for over 20 years have monitored E. coli at least monthly at 6 locations along Boulder Creek within the city, as highlighted here on this map. E. coli results are highly variable, so conclusions should be based on trends rather than individual samples. The next few slides will highlight common trends for Boulder Creek E. coli concentrations using box and whisker plots. On the right here is a quick box plot refresher. The dark line represents the median value. Gray boxes symbolize the middle 50% of the data, or the interquartile range, while the whiskers extend 1.5 times the interquartile range in either direction. The red dashed line has been included on these figures to represent Colorado's E. coli standard, and any outliers beyond the whiskers have been omitted just to focus on the trends rather than individual samples. So this first box plot here shows the annual range of E. coli concentrations in Boulder Creek for each of the last 20 years and indicates that E. coli concentrations have in fact remained stable. This figure also displays Boulder Creek's periodic exceedance of the state's E. coli standard, which has led to its placement on Colorado's list of impaired waterways. Second figure, this displays Boulder Creek E. coli concentrations do generally increase as you move downstream or west to east through the city. That being said, we do typically see a reduction downstream of the dense urban corridor that we've attributed to natural attenuation and limited recreational access to the stream. This next figure here shows that Boulder Creek, the concentrations of E. coli in Boulder Creek do fluctuate throughout the year, with the highest concentrations typically occurring in late summer and early fall. This trend is likely attributed to the warmer temperatures and lower flows that are occurring during that time, which are more favorable for E. coli growth. City staff have conducted E. coli source investigations for priority stormwater outfalls flowing into Boulder Creek. Overall, the investigations have found that the sources of E. coli from the city's stormwater system are generally dispersed and not easily controllable. No cross connections with the sanitary sewer have been identified. And the most prevalent sources included wildlife, domestic pets, and improper trash management, none of which are point sources or easily controllable. I would also like to recognize that humans are included on this list of sources. However, our investigations have indicated that human contributions, including encampments, are not the sole or most important factor for E. coli concentrations within Boulder Creek. City staff are continuing to pursue opportunities to reduce E. coli in Boulder Creek where possible. The Water Quality Group has increased their education and outreach efforts to inform our community about the potential risks of recreating in Boulder Creek. The city's spill response and waste removal programs help prevent pollutants, including E. coli, from reaching the stormwater system and Boulder Creek. And E. coli reduction projects are opportunistically pursued as they come up. A current example includes a project with CU to install an automated headgate that will minimize ditch return flow from a priority stormwater outfall back to Boulder Creek. And increased public education and outreach efforts have emphasized tips for safe recreation and can be found on signs along Boulder Creek, the city's webpage, and annual press releases. These resources are meant to provide the public with information on first how to recreate safely in Boulder Creek, then the city's E. coli monitoring, source identification, and mitigation efforts, as well as what community members can do themselves to help reduce E. coli in Boulder Creek. So next steps for the city's E. coli program include continuing our routine E. coli monitoring in Boulder Creek and the city's stormwater system, maintaining accurate and up-to-date information, educational resources for the public, prioritizing source identification efforts on human and controllable sources of E. coli, including the city's infrastructure, and finally, updating program recommendations based on the findings from the source identification efforts to date. So with that, to open it up to questions on all three topics, or especially the E. coli presentation.
Question on the, and apologies if this is a dumb question, but you said you monitor monthly for the E. coli?
Yes, so back at this location, so our monitoring program, it's said at least monthly, so we kind of switch up our timing throughout the year. So we monitor for E. coli and a number of parameters every month, and then during those times where we see elevated E. coli, so August, September, October, we're then monitoring weekly, and that helps. That increased frequency kind of helps us better understand what's happening during that time, and also helps us evaluate where Boulder Creek is against the state standard.
That was my question, is like, if monthly, are you, and I don't know this, if it spikes after storms or what, and if you're just doing monthly, are you missing potential big changes? It sounds like probably not, and you're capturing in the month where it's the most prevalent, you are doing it more frequently, so hopefully you're catching those swings.
Exactly, and that decision was made for a number of years. over a decade, we'd monitored weekly throughout the entire year. And then we took a quick look, and as our program shifted, we decided that that weekly frequency throughout the entire year was not really providing us
Okay.
with more actionable information. So we transitioned those resources more to the source identification.
What's the specific purpose for where the specific monitoring points are?
Yeah, sure. These have been around for a while, so the furthest upstream site, BC Canyon, that site was chosen because to evaluate what does stream conditions look like when they enter city. Eben G. Fund Park was added as an E. coli monitoring site because it's a popular recreational access point. And then the next remaining sites were BC 13, CU, and 30. Those were all chosen to just understand how E. coli concentrations are changing as you move through the corridor. And that final downstream location at BC 55 was what does the stream look like as it's kind of exiting the city limits.
Is that above or below our treatment plant?
That is upstream of our treatment plant. The one other thing I would note here is this. I highlighted these locations because these were all in the impaired segment of Boulder Creek. So that's also why I wanted to highlight those today.
So if you saw like a dramatic increase in E. coli in the creek, what actions would be taken beyond what just right out education outreach?
Yeah, I think it depends on. Once we kind of conduct that source identification, it depends on the nature of the source. There are kind of working through what is controllable. Let's say we have, it's worst and best case scenario, we have someone accidentally plumbed into the sanitary sewer in our stormwater system. That's something we can fix. We can reconnect those pipes how they should be connected and address that source. Urban, if it's coming from urban wildlife, that leaves us with less treatment options there. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Wildlife probably naturally wouldn't lend itself to like a spike or a sudden change.
Correct. Yeah. No further questions. I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
The last topic is definitely one that is of interest to the community. We sometimes receive some correspondence where people are frustrated with that the stream is in the condition it is. And so this is one of the topics that since I've become a director, I've learned about and seen how the team is going about systematically reviewing it. And I'm impressed with the plan. It's hard to find a source that there's something that we can do about it. It just tends to happen in urban areas. But I like how our team is going through it methodically and systematically looking for it. And I think there's still work to be done in the field investigations as Michael identified, but as time goes on, the public education will just become more and more prominent in the we're not quite there yet.
Oh, yeah, Megan, Michael, thank you very much. And Megan as well, thank you. Really helpful. That we can move to matters from the board. Have anything? That we can move to matters from staff.
And I didn't have too much this month, although checking with Chris and Joanna mentioned some information on a turf replacement kind of example project we're doing, and I might look to Joanna to do a quick update on that if she's willing.
I am willing, and I do have an update, so thanks for the time. I I believe you all had heard about this before, but wanted to provide a brief update on the sustainable grass conversion project, sometimes known as turf replacement. The city is doing a pilot project that's on the northeast corner of Baseline and 30th Street and really focused on residential scale turf conversion efforts that do not use herbicides. And we thought it was timely to give this update because we're planning to begin on irrigation system modifications and then turf removal beginning next week. We have let folks in the area know, letters have been sent out, postcards have been sent out. And then there also will be a yard sign in this area to let passersby know what's happening. There's 3 different versions of turf removal there, kind of a manual removal and then a black plastic, and then more layers of newspaper and other materials. And so visibly, it'll be a visible project that people can track either in person or on the website online. So again, that's kicking off next week. There is also a related project that Resource Central reached out to us kind of coincidentally on doing a similar pilot. Their timeline isn't exactly aligned with ours, so they're a little bit behind where we are in terms of project execution, but they're hoping to run a similar pilot that focuses on finding scalable non-chemical solutions that can be applied to larger properties like HOAs or commercial properties. So we're still in conversations about how we might be able to partner on that and support them. So I don't want to steal their thunder about all the details, but they seem like really complementary pilot projects. And so we'll work with them to see what we can do. And then both projects would be aimed at providing the outcomes of both of these efforts and educational materials so folks can use it on their own properties. So stay tuned for more information on that as we keep going.
Add that really quick. Thank you for that, Joanna. And there's a lot of Front Range communities struggling with that scalability issue, how to do large scale turf replacement. And there's a couple additional pilot projects happening that I'm aware of that we could potentially learn from. The city of Westminster at their city hall. If you've ever been there, there's a 3-acre, like immaculate neon green bluegrass lawn that no one ever touches. And they've been working for 2 years, and I think this year they're gonna break ground on replacing most, if not all of that. And so that would be a good example. And then University of Northern Colorado in Greeley on their campus is also doing a similar large scale turf replacement project. And so there could be opportunities to learn from our neighbors on that scaling issue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. That's all I had this month. If you want, I can move to the upcoming agenda.
Sounds great.
So the way things are shaping up and has been our practice the last several years, after all heavy lifting on the capital improvement program, we'll take a break here in August and we'll have a meeting. Then looking ahead, thinking of a short business meeting in September, possible working with the team, possible update for the board on the Goose Creek flood project, if everything comes together there. And so that will be part of a short business meeting. We review the minutes and things like that we need to take with it. And then there's some really great stuff happening on the main sewer project and some tunneling work, and it's an excellent time to go out and do a tour. So we've done that with the board in the past. That's something that came up at the retreat last year, that there was interest in doing more of that. And so that's how things are looking in September, and I want to come back to availability on that. And then in October, again with the water quality team, some backflow prevention measures and Boulder revised code updates that are things that council takes action on. Going back to the beginning of the meeting, I don't know that there's a formal role for RAB, but oftentimes when we're taking something to council, we like to share it with the board as well, so that we can at least share your informal feedback if you have any. So that is how things are shaping up. And with Lauren resigning and from the board and moving out of state, we're left with 4 board members, and John had mentioned to me that he potentially has, or likely has, a conflict in September. And so in a scenario, we have to have 3 to have a meeting, and so if others have availability issues, we can look at that, and it is not. In the past, we've rescheduled a meeting within a month, and John, if you would like to be there, or if we don't have all 3 members for the original September 16th date, we can look at that, and that's something we could pull the board offline, but wanted to mention that. We'll kind of be looking for critical mass there. That's what I have on the upcoming schedule.
So we need to confirm that 3 of us will be here at least.
On September 16th, if we hold it then.
And we might do a field trip to the sewer project that.
Yeah, if we are planning on doing that, and so it would probably make sense to have the business meeting at the MSC building down in 5050 Pearl, I think the address is. It's where we used to have RAB meetings, and then the location that we would go to is kind of out by the Stasio ball fields and the waste management entrance, and it's not very far away from there.
I was planning to attend the meeting, but virtually, because I'll be on the East Coast then, so is there any chance we could, if you're gonna be going too, is there any chance?
I have guests in town too, so I would love to reschedule.
Do we do the on-site thing for the October meeting instead of September one, maybe?
And it's
Question on where we are on the construction.
Yeah,
Yes, we may miss the active construction.
I think daylight would probably be okay, but they might be done with the part that you could see.
Should we consider, rescheduling the September meeting then? If you're gonna be out of town, I'm out, you'll be attending.
I can attend anytime, but I'll be zooming in. Yeah.
Why don't we poll the board just by email and throw out some things?
I would like to see the channel well happening.
Yeah, yeah. It is definitely one of those things that. I mean, I've seen a lot in my time at the city, but it's pretty impressive what's being done. So we'll follow up with a poll, and we'll figure something out. Cool, that's what we got.
All right,
It's an efficient meeting. That is their motion to adjourn the meeting.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Thanks
you,
again
everyone.
for the presentation.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.